There was a ban on cousin marriage in the 6th century. This was an absolutely seminal moment in the history of our species. And that forced people to marry outside their tribe.
And more social cohesion.
An emerging national identity.
Yeah. And then invited an inordinate number of people who were perhaps still in that tribal phase.
People from the Kashmiri community are still marrying their cousins. It's been a serious strategic mistake, one that we didn't envision at all. It worries me deeply that cousin marriage is holding these siloed communities in places like Rochdale and Bradford, congenital diseases.
Quite siloed.
This cultural relativism, the idea that all cultures are equal, and it's racist to question.
There's no now just putting the toothpaste back in the tube, is there?
I think that there's only two things we can realistically do. One is and ban cousin marriage.
Hi guys, can you please do me a favour? We're trying to make sure over 50% of you viewers subscribe. Please hit subscribe now. It's free and helps us grow. Are we headed for World War? See, that's what I want to talk to you about. Are we I saw you on trigonometry. I mean, you're a brilliant speaker. You've got a brilliant mind, and I love what you're writing as well. You're quite esoteric as well. I got to really think when I'm reading your work, which is great. And I saw you recently talking about World War III potentially, but this was when this whole stuff with Iran was going on a month ago. Suddenly Iran's just not even a thing. And this will come out in 2 weeks, so maybe it will be a thing again. But Iran's completely off everyone's radar suddenly. Are we still headed towards some kind of World War III? How might it happen? What's going on?
I think there's no doubt that the world is more unstable and volatile than it was 5 years ago or 15 years ago or 50 years ago. And I think it's not impossible. We have war in Europe, in Ukraine. We have conflict in the Middle East. We have conflict in Africa. But I think it's not impossible that if China, depending on how brave Xi Jinping is feeling, go for a blockade of Taiwan, then you would have war in 3 theatres, and you'd have a reasonably coherent set of adversaries. You'd have the Western Alliance, NATO, as it's sometimes called, and then Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. And these kind of wars happening simultaneously in different theatres, I think you would probably then describe it as World War. I think it's a risk. I think it's one of the risks we face as a species, but there are others that we talk about less. I think we have existential risk from AI. I think there's existential risk from bacteriological warfare. There's existential risk, I think, probably coming down the tracks as we learn more through AI about new kinds of technologies that we haven't yet developed the capacity to control or channel effectively. And because we're so disputatious at the moment in the world, I don't think it's really likely that we're going to be able to come together and adequately control any of these things. So we're in a very interesting and unusual era in the history of humanity. Most eras think that they're in a special era. Yeah. But if you actually look at and it's very interesting if you look at these wonderful books. I'll have to remember the name so you can maybe post it on the of the evolution of technology. Mm-hmm. Because if sort of anatomically modern humans came around, say 250,000 years ago, very little technological change for centuries, sometimes thousands of years at a time. You might change slightly a stone axe or an arrowhead. We hunted and gathered in nomadic groups across most of the world. The agricultural revolution, 12,000 years, shook it up, but economic growth was basically very close to zero. And even after the agricultural revolution, when we were effectively using wood as the main source of fuel, if you wanted to get more economic activity, you had to bring less fertile land into cultivation, which reduced the returns to labor and capital. So it was just very difficult to create compound growth, if that makes sense, exponential growth.
Yeah.
It was only really with coal where you just keep digging and then converting that latent heat energy into mechanical energy, everything hockey sticks up. And so if you think about electricity, population explosion, and all of the other things that we computation that we think of as now distinctive of the world, this all happened relatively recently. And really the action is accelerating, I think, with drones and AI and cyber and the scientific breakthroughs we're making, the web of science, which could be contained 300 years ago in 12 volumes of encyclopedias, there are now millions of papers, so that any one person can only know a very tiny sliver of knowledge. So it means people are making breakthroughs in these tiny areas, but not many other people know about it. We don't know what the risks are, about how these things can come together to create the exponential and existential risks, which I think are arising ever faster. So it's very interesting to me. E.O. Wilson, wonderful scientist, said that we're drowning in information but starving for wisdom. Wisdom, the capacity to bring different bits of knowledge together, to understand how they fit together so we can use them productively, but also mitigate the risks that face us as a civilization. And I think war is one of them, but there are many others.
Is that last part you said, is that a weakness of something that I've always loved the idea of, which is individualism? You know, I used to, my old channel, I used to sort of have a go at all the religions and cults and things. So one week it would be Hasidic Jews, and then Mormons, FLDS, Islam, all of these things. And, but there were sort of, you know, this collective notion of a wise person and a group telling stories to one another. And now we're sort of individuals.
Do I think that that's one
That
of
might
our
be
problems?
responsible for the lack of wisdom.
I think individualism has had a kind of dual effect in history. After the agricultural revolution, where you're cultivating land and domesticating animals, can you see, with nomadic hunter-gatherers, anyone angry comes your way, you can just go somewhere else and just pick the fruit and whatever else that you need to eat and survive. So it's a very sparsely populated planet. But once you're cultivating land and you're putting effort into building a community, you need to be able to defend the land. Otherwise, somebody can just wait, see you cultivate it, and then just take it from you.
Yeah.
But at that point, in order for you to be able to... communal defense, it seems to me, is built out of social solidarity. Because if you and I don't know each other, but if somebody started to... you can imagine there's an incentive to try and hide behind each other. We're genetically selfish.
Yeah.
But how do you build out this social solidarity at scale beyond a family? You start seeing all around the world the emergence of tribes and clans and kindreds, social institutions built around a shared ancestor god, a kind of a glue to hold them together, rituals, initiation ceremonies, certain types of dancing, rhythmic dancing. All of these are trying to create a sense of social solidarity. And of course, that enables these tribes to survive and thrive. And then obviously, because all of these tribes are trying to get bigger, so they become stronger, you get chiefdoms where different tribes work together. But these obviously can fracture easily because there isn't really a sense of solidarity beyond the sort of narrow tribal allegiances. And so what's fascinating to me is I think the rise of England as a power, quite strange in a way. 1000 AD, Islamic scholars were looking quite amusedly at this set of islands off the kind of northwest coast of the Eurasian landmasses, very backward, and we were pretty backward. But there was a ban on cousin marriage brought in by the Catholic Church. It affected England and other parts of West and Northwestern Europe. And that forced people to marry outside their tribe. Tribes are held together by inward marriage. You marry other tribal members so the tribe survives through time, historical time. Whereas it went up to 6 cousins by the 10th century. So it's forcing people to marry outside their tribe. So
6 cousins is in cousin
a
of cousin
sixth
of
cousin.
Right, yeah.
So in other words,
you were only allowed to marry someone who was
further away than your 6th. That's a very, very long...
Yeah.
Let's say
especially back then, you probably really had to have a think.
You had to go to a different village. You had to marry somebody from a different...
They didn't have the sort of heritage tests. So
that's right. That's right. I mean, I'm guessing that probably, I don't know, but probably the brilliant anthropologist Jack Goody wrote about this. And I think really figured out the importance of family structure to the success of nation states. Effectively, people are marrying outside. The tribes are dissolving over the course of the High Middle Ages. So in much of the world, still as today, there are not nation states. There's basically a group of competing tribes. Think of Lebanon and Syria and sub-Saharan Africa. They're still fighting. And in that kind of a society with these different verticals, these different tribes, Nepotism flourishes because you give jobs to people within the tribe, because you don't trust people in other tribes. They're often your enemy. If you do win power through a democratic election, you loot the public coffers to share with your sectarian proxies. You extort bungs from strangers to share with your group. So you can see corruption and the lack of social trust. This is all things that happen within tribal societies. But because we broke out of it, we started having individualism. So people were no longer enmeshed within a clan where their marriage was arranged for them, where their place in the social structure was determined at birth, where all of their responsibilities were to people on the inside. They now had to think about it. If you grow up in a tribe, you know that your business partner is going to be somebody within the tribe. And there's a certain reciprocal responsibility to do. Whereas if you're an individual, you're out of a tribe, you're on your own. You have to cultivate certain dispositions in order to attract voluntary partners, business people who voluntary exchange, voluntary association. And I think that began to build out a very profound trajectory for England. Because at the same time that we're developing a stronger sense of individualism, ironically, we're also developing a wider solidarity to the nation state.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because if you're somebody in a tribal society, the tribe comes first. If you're in an individualistic society where you're cultivating your own attributes, people are becoming more patient. You can see this in the level of interest. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because no one wants to do business with a hothead. They want someone who's patient, someone who's willing to take their time, who can delay gratification. So you start to see a reduction in the real interest rate in the UK over the course of this dissolving of the clan and tribal institutions.
And more social cohesion.
More social cohesion, and also a sense of, instead of these narrow identities, an emerging national identity. Yeah. So I think that you actually get your point that individualism can weaken a society in a certain sense. That's true, I think, where we are today. But there was a very long period, I think, where the combination of individualism and an emerging national identity did incredible things for this country and created a lot of people with deep wisdom, in addition to institutional wisdom that we see in the rule of law, in Parliament, in the guilds, and other related institutions.
So I don't want to just sort of throw you into the culture wars, but there we were with those sort of individualism going quite well here, and then invited an inordinate number of people who were perhaps still in that tribal phase, or still was maybe not the right word because it implies one is more ahead of the other, but they were in the tribal phase, who have much stronger ties, who have less interest in social cohesion with the rest of the nation. Has that been maybe the downfall here?
It's been a serious strategic mistake, one that we didn't envision at all. No. Because very few people in the West, we've been individualistic for so long, we don't understand tribal nations or tribal psychology. I mean, we thought that we could liberate Iraq and that it would become a Jeffersonian liberal democracy. We had no idea about the clan affiliations, not to mention the Sunni Shia split, which made it very difficult to create functioning democratic institutions. So I think bringing a lot of people over this period of mass uncontrolled immigration has been a mistake. But remember, I think it's worth saying, if I may say so, that over time, new people to this country begin to assimilate.
Providing there aren't too many.
Well, two things. Providing, you're right, if you have very, very many, they can recreate enclaves where they don't necessarily, but also this can be held together by cousin marriage.
Go on.
People, think about somewhere in Rochdale where people from the Kashmiri community are still marrying their cousins. It's a mechanism of social sequestration because they're continuing to marry within the group.
Oh, so when you say held together, you mean holding together perhaps the negative side for Britain because they remain quite siloed and strong.
Well, in a funny kind of a way, yes, strong in terms of the power of the patriarch. It's often these clans are run by patriarchs who arrange the marriages and keep hold of the property. So they're strong in a sense of there's very strong social solidarity, but incredibly weak because it means they're not getting the benefits of being in this incredible society. and the blessings that can accrue. I think of my father when he married my mum. Was it easy? No.
Because to remind the audience, she was a Christian and he was a Sunni.
So he had converted to Christianity, but he came up with this cultural tradition where, men are more important than women. It took him a long time to understand the idea of sexual equality. So there are lots of cultural jarring, what's the right word? Cultural clashes, friction.
Yeah.
But by meeting and marrying my mum, he's connecting with her family, with her friends, with all of these different ways of thinking about the world. And of course, he's seeing this society not from the vantage point of living within a silo and looking out at these strangers, but being part of it and then navigating his way through it. Did he suffer from racism in the 70s, 60s and 70s? For sure. But he came to love this country more than almost anybody I know. He was one of the great patriots to this country, extraordinary. And he would have fought and died for the country, no doubt about it in my mind. And one of the reasons is, and it's a deep irony that's often missed by people who grow up here, he could see that even though there was racism, he was getting a chance based on his talents and his hard work, compared to Pakistan, which is deeply sectarian, or India with this iniquitous caste system. This was the least racist society he had ever experienced. And I think for that reason, he really came to admire what we've achieved here. And it worries me deeply that cousin marriage is holding these siloed communities in places like Rochdale and Bradford who are not getting the benefits. And actually, in addition, congenital diseases.
Well, yeah, I was going to say.
Recessive disorders, much higher prevalence of that. And I would like to ban cousin marriage, not because I'm negative towards these people, but to free them from under the thumb of the patriarchs and some of these institutions that are really holding them back.
If your dad had come over with a group of friends and family like that in a city today like Bradford or Birmingham or something,
my life would have been completely different. Yeah. I would have. He joked, when we went to Karachi in the late 70s. And he said, you could meet your future wife here because all your cousins are there. I was like, what? Funnily enough, it's funny, I think my interest in politics started to percolate around that time. I was like, what do you mean? Because I think of my mum's cousins as like sisters. I thought it was illegal, I think, even as like a 9, 10-year-old. He was like, no. You can marry your cousins in Pakistan. And then I got to Pakistan. It's a great country in many ways. I love being there. But I could see that these groups, these extended families and clans, was having an effect on psychology, moral psychology. Do you see what moral psychology? How people think about the world, how they engage with the world, how they behave, what the level of patience is, their attitude to corruption. I started seeing all these downstream consequences, but it wasn't until I read. I mentioned Jack Goody, but Joe Henrich at Harvard has written a wonderful book on this, that I fully began to grasp the significance of family structure to the trajectory of civilizations.
Bloody hell. I'm interested. Okay, I've got to say, you're one of the first guests I've had where I sort of went in, okay, this is what the title will be, because you have to sort of do that. But also because you're sort of fountain of knowledge kind of, it can go anywhere. And I didn't think you'd be talking about cousin marriage and sort of pinpointing that as almost the downfall of multiculturalism. Is that too far to say?
Well, I think so. I think the ban on cousin marriage, along with other...
Are they banning it?
No, well, the ban on cousin marriage in the 6th century.
Yeah, right.
So this is Augustine of Canterbury coming to Anglo-Saxon Kent, bringing it in. I think this was an absolutely seminal moment in the history of our species. I think it was the snowball that created the extraordinary avalanche of the Industrial Revolution, which was the seminal, we talked about this already, haven't we, this sort of seminal moment in our history. In fact, the wonderful historian, anthropologist Ian Morris, I think he says the Industrial Revolution made a mockery of all previous human history. It was the big thing. But I do think that cousin marriage today, which lapsed, so the ban on cousin marriage lapsed with Henry VIII when he wanted to marry a cousin. So it was happening amongst some social elites at a very trivial level, but it was happening. It didn't recreate tribes or anything like that because it was far too lower frequency to lead to any of the tribal flaws that I've described. But the era of mass uncontrolled immigration did bring in large communities that were still, and I think are still, marrying their cousins at a scale that is very detrimental to them and to wider society. And that's why, I have argued strongly for a ban on cousin marriage. And I'm glad to say the Conservatives back it. And I think Reform will back it soon too.
But Labour...
It's interesting with Labour. Labour, it's a tremendous conceptual flaw. They feel queasy about going after it because they say it's a cultural practice. We don't want to affect cultural sensitivities. But it's a cultural practice that is holding these communities back. I mean, there was the same reluctance to talk about honour beatings and female genital mutilation. Oh, it's a cultural practice. An absolutely terrible This cultural relativism is, I think, somewhere near the heart of it. The idea that all cultures are equal and it's racist to question.
I suppose they might
tradition.
also, just to try and get there, which I don't agree with, but they would say it's moral imperialism from us.
Same point in different words.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Yeah, and I would strongly argue that one should seek, in general, to persuade people that certain things. There are many of our cultural traditions today that people will look back on in 300-400 years' time and say they were completely ridiculous. We need to be aware of how we need to adapt. I think a successful society does adapt. But, I mean, look at Japan. Japan's had up until, say, the last 30, it's still, what is it, the third biggest economy in the world, Japan?
Yeah, why not? I don't know.
But, they during the Meiji Restoration, they explicitly went around and said, why is Europe doing so well? And America. And they basically brought I think it was German law, into their legal code. And they changed their marriage structure. Mao Zedong in the 1950s was like, we're incredibly poor. Our GDP capita is like 1/20th of what they're in. We're an ancient and successful civilization. What's gone wrong? And he banned cousin marriage. He came to realize that the clans in China were holding back the broad-based innovation and prosperity that the West was enjoying. And so I think we need to be aware of where we can adapt in sensible ways. But I don't think it's cultural imperialism to say to somebody who is being held back by a cultural tradition, seek to persuade them. And I think in very rare cases, you should use the law to do so.
And with cousin marriage,
I do think that, yeah.
I had an interesting thought the other day. It was actually Ann Coulter. Do you know who she is?
Yes, I do.
She came on, and she was actually very nice. She wasn't, and her views weren't not as controversial as I thought from just talking to her. And she said she's concerned about Mexican immigration in the States, and I said, well, at least it's Christianity, and the cultures are more similar in that sense. And she didn't like that because she was like, are you aware of the beheadings and the Mexican cartels and blah blah? But her point was, it's not actually the same religion because it's Catholicism against a kind of, what is it, Protestantism in America, and that it's actually interesting to have a look at the countries that did really well. I think Germany, Britain, and it was Protestantism. So do you think that there might be something in Protestantism?
Well, this has been well studied. The interesting thing about Protestantism is it was individualism on steroids. In the sola scriptura, the idea that the individual could commune directly with God. Now, in Catholicism at that point, you went through a priest. There was a very clear social hierarchy through which people could commune with this creator. The question is, I suppose, why did Protestantism sell in Europe? Why is it that this variants of Christianity and religions emerge all the time, different people with different doctrines? The question is, why do some spread? And I think the answer is because there was a proto-individualism already within Europe at that point. So when Luther pinned the indulgences, the theses to the door, in where was it? Was it Gutenberg? Forgive me, I should know that. No, it wasn't.
Should I look it up?
Yeah, but I think what's fascinating to me is that spread so far and fast, because I think it was speaking to an individualism in the psyche. You can measure this psychologically, by the way. These differences. If you look at the rate, so You've heard of Daniel Kahneman, for example, the psychologist.
Thinking Fast and
Slow.
Yeah.
Do you remember all those different biases that he describes there, like loss aversion?
Yes.
And the disposition effect and the fundamental attribution error. And
yes.
There's all these little biases. And people thought, well, this is a bias common to all humans. But who do you think psychologists perform their experiments on?
The people who have already changed to the thing.
Well, people it's Western universities. They do it on Western undergraduates.
Yeah.
Often psychology undergraduates
who've grown up in that culture of individuals.
Of course, exactly.
So are you saying that?
So when you try and replicate the experiments that demonstrate the fundamental attribution error in a different society without individualism, it doesn't replicate.
So you're saying that humans don't necessarily lean towards individualism. It's just happened in this society.
That's why I was talking about sometimes we focus too much on genetic differences. These cultural traditions massively shape the way we engage, even the way we see the world. So have you ever seen that illusion? I keep asking for the brilliant.
They don't know anything.
Oh, they don't know it? No, they do. They do. They're two geniuses.
I don't have like a Joe Rogan guy who's in there like looking things up. Jamie.
Yeah, right. What's that illusion? The
Myers-Briggs or something?
No, Muller-Lyer illusion it is, I think, where you have two lines that look of different length.
Yeah.
And there's
and everybody gets sort of pushed to do it.
Yeah, but these visual illusions vary systematically around the world. So in other words, the most basic transaction with the world, the way we perceive it, is shaped by different cultural psychology. So if you ask somebody in the UK, finish this sentence, I might say I am a journalist and a former table tennis player, my individual characteristics. You ask somebody in a tribal society, they'll say, I am the son of Abbas and of Dillis and the cousin of so-and-so, because their world has been culturally constructed by the communities into which they're born. They think more. So people in these societies think more holistically. If you show them a image of a fish tank and then ask them to remember it, they'll remember the individual fish and their colours. You ask somebody in a more tribal society, a more collectivist society, they'll remember the background, how the fishes fitted around each other, and so on. And so all of these biases, they vary systematically around the world. And guess who are the most extreme? The Westerners. They anchor the tail of the distribution in most of these respects. So we're highly unusual. Our cultural traditions have shaped rule of law. I mean, think of rule of law. It's a bizarre idea to many people.
Go on.
Why on earth would a judge interpret a contract impartially? Surely they would favour the person from their tribe. It seems completely bizarre. This is why when we thought we can introduce the rule of law to these tribal societies, they became more corrupt. You put wigs and courtrooms, but if people are just favouring people from their own small tribe, it makes the society less functional rather than more so. You need to have a sense of impartiality. This is one of the benefits of individualism. And also, of course, it helps also to have a national identity. There's an idea of the public interest, of civic virtue.
But there's no now just putting the toothpaste back in the tube, is there, from Blairite or Blairism until now with this multiculturalism? So what's next? Do Catherine Burble make these schools that sort of force people to adapt to British culture, or what do we do?
What do we do politically? I think that there's only two things we can realistically do. One is reduce the level of immigration. That's a very important lever.
Yeah.
So legal, I think we should stop the boats stone dead. That's probably not the right phrase, actually. We should stop the boats so that people don't die anymore.
Yes.
They're only taking the crossings because they think they'll get here and stay here. I went to Calais and talked to them. It's completely obvious that it's the fact they might die on the crossing was outweighed by the prospect of getting here and staying here. If they know they will be instantly deported, they will just stop coming. In order to instantly deport them, you need to change the human rights framework and the Refugee Convention. It's been obvious for years we should do that.
Why is everyone so resistant?
It's incredible to me. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. Mystifies me. I've talked to the Attorney General, invited me into. There's not a single politician I've found who has disagreed when you explain that you must stop the boats by changing the legal. If you want to be a nation that obeys the rule of law, worth doing, and stop the boats, you must change the legal framework. It's better to do that than just stop them coming and, as it were, break the law or the conventions into which you have.
But didn't we leave the EU so we could do that?
Well, the problem, no, not really, because it's a refugee convention in the human rights framework for illegal immigration.
So that wasn't about the EU then?
That was more about legal immigration, I think, than illegal immigration. But what's extraordinary is because Russia knows that people in desperate situations are going to come to Western Europe, they have an incentive to stoke instability. Do they not? In the Sahel, in the Central African Republic, which they have said explicitly.
In order to
put pressure on the West, because they don't go to Russia.
This is what the far right thinks the Jews are doing. They believe the Jews are deliberately making Europe multicultural in order to weaken it. I don't know why they think that, but that's what they think.
No, I think that's profoundly implausible.
I know.
But Russia have. There are think tanks that have published and Russian figures in the military who have explicitly talked about this strategy of fomenting instability. So in other words, if you like, the push factors are generated by our laws that are supposed to be humane. It is a catastrophe. But of course, the question of how many refugees you want to take is completely separable from the question of how you wish to take them. I say take them through safe and legal routes and completely end illegal migration. You can take as few as you wish through safe and legal routes. It's a democratic judgment call for us. But you must stop illegal immigration.
Yeah.
But the question you asked was about how to end multiculturalism. Well, I think first of all you reduce legal immigration. You said that if you have very many people coming, they can recreate their communities here.
Yeah.
You stop the boats completely and ban cousin marriage. I think those combined will have a significant effect. I think having community centres and, there are sort of commissions, aren't there, looking at how we can do things. I suspect they won't have much of an effect. I'm not confident about the ability of the state to micromanage human behaviour. They have big levers like immigration and cousin marriage. I think that can play a role.
Did you see yesterday? I think a lot of people online got a bit aggravated about what was a post for a Sharia law enforcer or something on the Manchester Community Centre that was on the government website. And I understand both sides. Some people are saying, no, well, that's just as you might have in some sort of Haredi Jewish community. That's sort of one of these people who would handle divorces and whatever. But I think people are getting really fed up with just other cultures having separate laws.
Yeah.
Even though they are still subject to our laws.
Yeah.
Even culturally, just have those laws.
Yeah, I miss that. It was
23 grand a year, which is quite low. Although Manchester is not as, because it's not in the north. If that was in London, 23 grand a year.
That would be very well. But people upset that they were. But who's paying for the salary?
I don't know. But I think it's a community centre, some sort of charity in Manchester.
Yeah, it's not great. I mean, we are in a difficult position as a. I mean, it's not unrelated. I mean, I think that mass uncontrolled immigration has been a disaster. I think illegal immigration is solvable and therefore infuriating.
But isn't the real problem legal immigration levels, because the illegal one is so small comparatively, even though it gets us emotionally.
I think it's a big deal psychologically and culturally. I think people are absolutely. I couldn't believe. I saw my newspaper, the Sunday Times, did a big poll of British public opinion about all sorts of things. You could read through that poll, lots of different tendencies, but the absolute fury about the small boats was the most powerful thing of all.
Okay,
absolute fury about it.
This is the funny thing about, I don't know if it's the Overton window, I don't know what it is about us over the last 10, 20, 30 years, but when Trump first ran for presidency and he said he was going to build a wall, Now, I was a bit younger and didn't know much about politics and things like that. So obviously, as a young sort of English literature student and all those things, I thought he was a horrible bigot, because that's what you're supposed to think back then, and this is the worst person ever. Build a wall. And now I'm looking at it going, well, the wall its only purpose is to stop illegal immigration. It's a wall for his own country. He didn't do it in the end. But I think most people in England, despite saying that they are vehemently against illegal immigration, probably would still look at Trump as an almost farcical figure for suggesting he build a wall.
Yeah. I mean, there's two parts to it, isn't there? Stopping illegal immigration, I think, of course you stop it. Have legal routes if you want to have asylum seekers. It makes a mockery of the law. Think of what it's done to corrode the rule of law, this kind of tacit acceptance of illegal immigration in America, and now this massive battle with the, what are they called, ICE going in. And,
oh, yeah.
But that's really a logical consequence of this open border to the south that Trump has. I mean, I'm not a fan of Trump, but that I think is absolutely right. And as I say, it's nothing to do with humanity. It's inhumane.
Well, those of them drown, don't they, Mexicans, on the way?
I mean, the drownings in the Channel, the risks they take going over the Med.
Well, I mean, the Mexicans as well, because they've got these swamps and things, don't they?
Right. And also, as I mentioned, the incentive that it gives to totalitarians to foment instability, to create the misery that leads to these flows north.
Are you talking of Russia?
Russia.
That's really interesting.
Sure. I mean, I must point you to a couple of columns I've written on this. And when you explain it in a step-by-step systemic way to a politician, it's very difficult for them not to agree. And so it's funny. This weekend, I almost wrote on the small boats. And I thought, what's the point of cutting and pasting the last one? And it's amazing how our inability as a nation to act.
Well, Liz Truss sat exactly where you're sitting and said, well, there was nothing I could have done, even when, I mean, she was there such a short time anyway, but she said it's the deep state.
Did you probe that answer?
The deep state being, I guess, in the thick of it, it was the blockages. Did you watch the thick of it?
Yeah.
What was her name? They always called her a blockage, but the civil service.
But as the Prime Minister, she could have immediately called a conference with other Western leaders, all of whom are struggling with this issue.
Well, Starmer just did that with Macron, didn't he? And what did you get? He said it was one in, one out.
That's a waste of time. What Starmer's doing. I think any Prime Minister could have convened a meeting, as they did after the Second World War, to draft the Refugee Convention and say, it's not working. It's handing an incentive to Russia to stoke misery in Africa. Let's amend the document so that we can deport people who come illegally. That stops people coming illegally, dying in the oceans. And then we can have a judgment call on how many people we want to bring in legally and safely.
Is part of the problem, though. I mean, I know you talk about Times poll, but the Times is sort of centre-right just about, and obviously Telegraph readers, Daily Mail readers, but then half the country sort of, is it fair to half the country?
This is a random sample, though, the poll.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting to know, because I wonder how much, a lot of the things we're talking about right now, this is why this is called Heretics, and you can't talk about in most mainstream circumstances.
I don't think that's true anymore.
Do you think that's changed?
Reform are leading the opinion polls.
And yet, whenever I've had these discussions on sort of Ian Dale's cross question at LBC, I've been on there, and it feels like I'm telling, especially the politicians who just seem so ill-informed, it feels like they've never heard these talking points before.
It's odd, isn't it?
How many have you been on? You must have heard other people saying these things.
It's interesting you say that. There is something very odd. But let me perhaps say this. I think that even if we stop the small boats and we cut the level of legal immigration, we would still have very deep problems as a society. Very, very significant problems.
As a result of multiculturalism?
No.
Other issues?
No. We have vested interests that are holding us back. Many, many vested interests. We also have a very high level of debt, public debt, which is now 100% of GDP. It's just gone up and up over the last 50 years. We're spending money that we can't afford. So that actually Ray Dalio, a hedge fund owner, said that we're in a debt-death spiral. But effectively, that a lot of our public spending now is servicing the interest on our debt. So it means that we're taxing a lot and spending a lot, but we still feel very, very squeezed. And that is in my view, a problem of a society that has lost what really preeminently made us a great society, which was the capacity to delay gratification. If you look at, I mentioned the interest rate earlier. The interest rate in a non-fiat system, in say a gold system, the interest rate is a proxy for societal patience. You can see if you need an incredibly high interest rate to save, you're a pretty impatient person. And the interest rate was very low in England in 1500 because we had cultivated this incredible patience, and we were willing to delay gratification, and that meant we could save and invest and generate compound growth. In the last 50 years, we've run deficits every single year, bar I think 3. France every year, bar none. America's still growing. It has this incredible frontier spirit, this incredible entrepreneurism deep in its culture, but its debt is getting higher and higher. And Trump will add very significantly to the level of debt. And it's interesting. I was in Washington during the presidential election, and the federal debt was hardly mentioned. And in our general election, Starmer and Sunak competed to make more giveaways. We're not going to raise taxes. We're going to Sunak talking about a quadruple lock for pensions. Farage is rising in the polls partly because of the rhetoric on immigration, illegal and legal, but also because of these very profligate giveaways. We're bribing. And it's like for the electorate, I'm going to take the sweets, the bribes, but we are suffering as a consequence of the interest we're now paying on it. And we're bequeathing our children with a terrible inheritance. Let's not pretend that all of our problems are down to multiculturalism. We have some very severe indigenous issues too.
So we're pretty screwed. We need to be more tantric. When you say delayed gratification, I think of sort of Sting with his tantric stuff.
Yeah, right.
That's what he does.
That's the idea.
You and I were talking a little bit before about, and I suppose it relates to delayed gratification actually, what we do about an increasing incentive that seems to have appeared with the internet and the rise of YouTube and the rise of all the websites and things to sensationalize one's headlines and how others then feel, because we're humans, we just click on them. Do you feel as well with your headlines in the Times, has it spread as far as what we might call mainstream or legacy or whatever that is?
I definitely feel occasionally the pull of writing something more inflammatory and just going for clicks, because the algorithm, you see, if I don't have that many followers on social media, but on Twitter, if I can see my follower count going up when I write something very inflammatory. So you can play that game, and one's intelligence can be directed towards lots of clicks and then to monetize them and do well financially. In the end, I think, and the question is when this really happens, is I think and believe that people will start to, over time, but not too long, to think I'm sick of these sensationalistic nonsense. It's wasting my time. I'm spending too long on some of these platforms. I need to find sources of information that I think are trustworthy and cogent and empirical, and that those institutions who hold their nerve for long enough and maybe even need to make losses in the interim and then become bastions of truth will succeed, I hope, very much commercially.
Truth is different to sensation, because there's clickbait that is.
That's true.
This
is
an
important distinction.
They sort of hide what it is, and then you click it, and you're like, oh, bloody. And YouTube it's supposed to have an inbuilt mechanism to against that, because then you click on it, you go, hang on, this isn't what I thought it was, and you click off, and they go, right, that video does not get shared anymore.
Yeah.
So they do at least have that. I wonder. I'm a bit pessimistic about that, because I think it's a little bit like that that meme or cartoon or whatever of the, like, do you think, they ask a crowd, do you think that everybody is brainwashed? And everyone's like, yeah. And they're like, do you think you're brainwashed? And like, who thinks they are individually? No one thinks they are. So I think it's a similar thing where I get comments under YouTube often. Just why did you make that title? I'm actually less likely to click on it. I would rather click, because everyone wants to believe that they are the kind of person who would click on some kind of esoteric, and the reality is very few of us actually do that. I don't. I click on like, oh, that's a smashing headline. Or who's that? He's secretly a man, is he? I'm clicking on that. I'm clicking, it's brain junk food kind of thing. I don't think we can ever get past that.
But it's a new technology.
Yeah.
And we are slowly adapting to it. So I know that there are software or things that you can download onto your smartphone that turns it off for a certain period of time. There are people who've given up their smartphones there are, if you like, countermeasures being evolved. All, if you like, consumer technologies are about trying to get people to use that technology as much as possible. Ultra-processed food, highly palatable, so you eat more than you should. They advertise cars so that we buy more of them than are necessarily in our best interests. But culture develops certain types of countermeasures. So over the course of the Middle Ages, as food became more prevalent for the upper classes, table manners and different courses and cutlery, they're, as it were, pacing the gratification through cultural institutions and mechanisms. And I think you can see, in some ways, the evolution of societies as different types of phenomena that hack our capacity for technologies, if you like, social and otherwise, that hack our tendency to gratify ourselves, and we overconsume. And then we develop countermeasures. And I'm conscious that many people who are succeeding in the world today are successfully engaging with technology. They're not the whole time on news. They're not getting sucked down wormholes. They're finding new ways to adapt what they carry, how they interact, certain software packages that help them to stop themselves doing what they might have done 5 years earlier. Me and my wife turn our phones off at 7 o'clock and we put them away. In the same way that people have stopped walking past the donut shop on the way home, or they lock the sweets in the larder so they can't see them, or they make sure in the weekly shop they don't buy big packets of crisps. The state can sometimes get involved in these things too. So I would personally envision social media, the algorithms that are currently monetizing our inability to delay gratification. This interaction between us and it is in its very early days.
That's interesting. Yeah, you've blown my mind actually about the delayed gratification issue, and I think, but I mean, as you know, I agree with you that right now we're not there, and that's a kind of self-policing that we do in terms of gratification is maybe required in the future. But I mean, right now, a title. I mean, you've come all this way. It's taken you hours to get here. You had a conversation. You've given a lot of yourself. It's in your interest that this get as many views as possible because it will, attract more people to your work.
Yeah.
As is the case for me, of course. As is the case for everyone who works with me. And I'm of the belief that it's still honest because I believe that in my heart of hearts, the more people who click on it, those people will enjoy and get a lot from it. So those are all positives in a sense. Those are reasons, incentives for us. With all of that in mind, would I title this "The Importance of Delayed Gratification" or something about cousin marriage?
Yeah, you'll do the second. Yeah, and it makes sense. I mean, I came here, definitely to have a conversation, but it's a world I'm learning more about, and I do feel that this, the printing press led to a great deal of upheaval. These information ecosystems do change the way we do things, but then we adapt. In those societies that come out on top are the ones that adapt effectively. Of course, all of this is going to be superseded fast by AI.
Yeah.
And the large language models.
This is when we reveal that this actually was AI and neither of us were here.
Right. And isn't it incredible that probably there is an algorithm that could create...
Yeah. Matthew isn't really here. He's not here. I've just done an ad, and I won't because I'm not giving them extra exposure with the name, but for a company that does that. And I had to do 60 seconds of myself reading just gobbledygook. I just made up 60 seconds so it can see how I talk, how I sound, and all of those things. And then I can now say, make me a 1-minute video where I talk about the dangers of AI. And it's got a 1 minute and it's me talking with my voice.
And you can't even see that it...
You can just tell. Sometimes the eyes move a bit funny and the mouth goes...
But it will get there, won't it? Very soon.
In 2 months, in a year, it's there.
It's that's right. And by the way, this is, I think, the true cliff edge that we're moving towards. So... Jeff Hinton, who won the Nobel Prize recently for his work on the AI, he has made the point, and I've been lucky enough to speak to him directly, that it's possible AI will turn on us, the singularity. But even if you dispute that, it seems to me perfectly conceivable that AI could come up with a pathogen with a long incubation period and a very high infection fatality rate. I mean, they published the sequence of the Spanish flu on the internet a few years ago. You can create synthetic microbes relatively easily. And all it needs is one maniac to want to wipe out the earth. It's a population is certainly big enough to have a maniac. We agree.
Yeah.
AI is improving at an incredible pace. You bring one maniac together with AI, you've democratized the capacity to destroy the species.
Yeah.
Now, I find it very difficult to hear anybody who can dispute that claim. I put it to Jeff Hinton, and he said, yes, what you need is a moratorium on AI development. Stop. But of course, how do you police that? How in this disputatious world that we've emerged into, where all of these nations want the AI so that they can use it to become more powerful, but eventually, of course, they're going to create a technology that some individual is going to use to turn on everybody and wipe us all out. This is not like guns and cannons and gunpowder, where you can only kill 2 or 3 people at a time. You can create a systemic risk that wipes us all out. And the problem with that, for me, is partly the death of all the people currently living. But the real moral monstrosity that defies and rebukes the imagination is it kills all future people who would otherwise have lived, our children and grandchildren and great-grand, that could have lived for many millions of years and enjoyed the experience of life. And I asked politicians about this. How many people do you think work on the Bacteriological Weapons Convention for the UN?
I imagine
2.
No.
And its budget is the same as an average McDonald's. We are, in my view, a deeply superficial civilization when it comes to what we talk about. We've had a very, in my view, unusually deep conversation today. You try and bring this up on most platforms, people are just not interested. This may not get many clicks, but isn't it interesting that politicians are therefore not talking about it? People don't want to hear. When I write about existential risk in the Times, it gets almost no clicks. And that is what I think Wilson meant when he said we're starving for wisdom.
This might be the Fermi Paradox, an answer to the Fermi Paradox.
Yeah, exactly, it is. I think, of all of the explanations for it, I think the idea that there is a very severe filter, that it's difficult to get through when you reach a level of technological sophistication, when a civilization can destroy itself, I find it difficult to see beyond that. The other thing Wilson said, by the way, was we're a species with Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. That is the crisis that I think we face.
And on that existential note, I've got one more question for you, but first, where can people find your work and follow you?
Well, I don't have anything to promote. I've come for the fun of it and to meet you and these 2 brilliant people. Yeah. Even though I was late, the traffic. But
or your Twitter.
What am I? Well, I tell you, what would be a good thing? I mean, I'd love it if they would read the Times and the Sunday Times. I think what was the book? I think the book that people might find interesting, based on our conversation near the beginning, is Black Box Thinking. Which might be worth throwing out there. But maybe I should write this book on this global psychological variation, because I do think, and I can see you're a believer in these genetic differences explaining a lot based on the twin study by the person that you mentioned.
It's not, like I said, not a hill I'm dying on. It's just one set of evidence, but it's,
I would have said the same thing. I think I get where you're coming from. I think the literature on cultural evolution and the software downloads that are fundamentally altering not just gene expression, but how we think and perceive the world. If you have a world where all culture is the same, all differences are genetic, am I right? Yeah. At that point. Yeah. But that's not the world we live in. I think almost many of them are these cultural differences.
It can be bits of both.
Of course.
And the culture, where did the culture come from as well? You can so that's why I think it's just an impossible question to answer.
It's difficult to unravel. That's right. But think of it as gene culture co-evolution, that they're kind of nudging each other in this co-evolutionary duet.
I see that.
But what I fear is the cultural strand of that. Once you read this literature, as I mentioned, on the visual illusions and different moral psychology, I think and also the cultural evolution of genetic heritability. I think it just gives you a different slant on the world.
I get that. I know. I do need to read more on it. I'm primed. I know I'm biased, and I'm primed to believe in the IQ differentials because Ashkenazis come out well in that, and I'm one of them.
Oh, you're okay. Well,
Yeah.
we didn't even talk about Israel-Palestine.
I know it was
Did
all
you-
in the questions, but we've got
Do you have a position on it?
Israel Palestine. I think I agreed with everything you said on trigonometry, which is something I've heard Elon Musk say. He was saying early on. I think he said similar things to you, which was that. Yes, Israel had a right to defend itself and all of these kinds of things, but if it's thinking long-term strategically, it needs to actually build up Gaza. I think that's what you were trying to get. That's the point you were making, wasn't it? That's
I mean, broadly speaking, that the real game changer would have been a accord with Saudi Arabia. It would have isolated Tehran. I think young Arabs, having seen that heinous attack, would just think Hamas and these networks of genocidal proxies, the hatred would have been even stronger. I think funding would have been less for them. And I think the whole picture of the Middle East and the wider world would have been different. And I worry that Netanyahu is being led and leading Israel in the wrong direction, partly because of these fascists in the cabinet.
Yeah. I agree with that. And I think one of the frustrating thing for a lot of Jewish people, just speaking as a Jewish person in the UK, I think 95% of whom are Zionists, they do tend to share the sort of view of Israel. Many of us are quite happy accepting criticism about Israel. And I think the proof of that was in Tom York, the Radiohead singer. He came out and made a very strong statement against Israel. And he probably actually went too far because he equated Israel's government with Hamas. He sort of, he put them on the level play. And it's, one of them is, I think at the time, Democrats, and the others are terrorists.
I think that's a ridiculous.
It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
And the Jews in the UK loved his comment because at least for once he said all of those things. And then he said, let's remember also that they are dealing with a genocidal blah, 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 blah. And every Jew in the UK breathed a sigh of relief and went, okay, this is not someone singling out a country that happens to be the one Jewish state.
Yeah.
And the ones who were against Tom York, it was the sort of Corbynistas, they were going mental at him. Right. He was banned. He's over. He can't ever sing in front of those people again. I mean, Johnny Greenwood in the band, his wife is Israeli, so I think they've got a bit of and they say that they will play. And they've had a lot of shit from Roger Waters, Pink Floyd, who always has a go at radio.
I missed all this. He's across it. He's across all of this.
That was a couple of months ago. It was all kicking off. And so that for me was evidence. I mean, I was speaking with, I think it was Stig Abel on Times. It's Times, yeah. So he said, but what do you think when people say it's, a lot of Jewish people saying it's anti-Semitic, well, not just Jewish people on Israel say, to criticize Israel. And I said, look at Tom York. Every Jew loved what he said. By all means, have a go. But you've got to give that context, because without that context, it is just singling out one nation. None of that has anything to do, of course, with what you're saying, which is, Netanyahu. Absolutely. Well, that's why people aren't angry at you for criticizing Netanyahu, because they know that you're very, very much understanding of the whole wider context.
Yeah, I mean, a tiny bit of pushback, fine, no problem.
Jews sit there at like Friday night dinners and they're all going, shit, what's he doing, Netanyahu?
Yeah.
Like, it's going too far, and this is not good for us. What do we do? And not just not good for us, this is terrible what's happening to Palestinian people. They really do sit there and think and say those things. But we're in a place now where the Edinburgh Fringe has just cancelled 3 Jewish comedians who were not Zionists, didn't talk about Israel, but they weren't allowed to be at the because staff there felt unsafe with Jewish acts there. That's a hell of a place to be in.
That's outrageous.
And I put some of that at least down to our multiculturalism because of the rise of political Islamism in this country. Anyway, there's not time we could do another. Maybe you'll come back on and I can ask you all about that because you were really good on that. But I think we've had a great conversation. People, please go Matthew's side. I could put his book link down below. We're going to put Black Box Thinking. I'll speak to you if we put in a couple others as well, and his Twitter and Times column. Go and follow him because he's come. There's loads of traffic. He's come all the way here, so please go follow him. Get his books. He's brilliant, and like this, and keep watching this channel.